But then I noticed something interesting. That even as lockdown started coming to an end and people were allowed to meet again, I didn't feel the need as much. Like, why would I spend a full day traveling back and forth 250 miles to be able to have a conversation with people that I could have a perfectly good conversation with from my bedroom, whilst also being immersed in this highly stimulating video game with multiple interlocking systems to keep me engaged at all times? Or the other thing I've noticed is online shopping. Now, I get that there is still a good proportion of people out there who swear by the in-person experience. But if you look at the demographics, young people now are very much of the opinion that all shopping should be online. And I have no doubt that most babies who have just been born, they're not even going to consider shopping in person. It won't make sense to them. Like, why would they walk to an in-person shop when they can tap a few keys? Why would they browse through 1,000 things they don't want when they can literally type the exact word of what they're looking for? Why would they want to queue up and carry around their physical shopping bags all day when they can get them dropped to their doorstep later that afternoon? These are just some of the many examples of how I think we're already beginning to isolate, and I can only see this increasing. I already look around at so many restaurants and public places, and I see like 4 friends sitting together, but each one has a phone held to their face. So obviously in that moment, whatever app it is they're using has gotten so sophisticated, so good at its job, that it's managing to provide more value than their closest friends who are literally sitting in front of them. This isn't my opinion. There is so much data to show that time spent on the internet each year is flying, and that it's almost directly negatively correlated with time spent in person. And you could say, well, Aaron, if you want to go see people, go see people. And to some extent you're right. On an individual level, no one's stopping anyone from meeting. But on a societal level, I think that the institutions for seeing people are falling apart. Meetings are going digital, workplaces are dissolving, music concerts are now appearing within video games instead of in halls. Hell, even smartphone launch events, I used to go to tons of them, have now boiled down to just a pre-recorded video by a company that is dropped onto their YouTube channel. And this is not me saying that these are bad decisions. Technically speaking, they make sense. They're logical. Like, why would a company risk messing up a live in-person presentation when they can pre-record something, edit it, and make sure it's perfect? Why would you make people waste time going into work when they can do their job from their living room? I'm not saying that isolation is being forced upon us. It's actually scarier than that. It's that we are choosing isolation because as the tech improves, isolation makes our lives easier, less embarrassing, and more efficient. So, if you combine the 5 key things we've talked about so far, the jealousy, polarization, negativity, confidence, as well as the lack of incentive to physically see the people around us, I think it leads us to point 6. Chaos. You've probably heard of cancel culture, right? Thousands of angry people projecting their voices to actively try and ruin someone else's life, usually someone who's considered to be successful. Well, if you think about it, this is pretty much the natural conclusion of everything we've talked about so far. All you have to do is to log on to Twitter, and every single day you will find a trending topic that people are verbally molesting each other over. 2 sides with completely different views who not just disagree, but seem to strongly want harm to come to the other party. And it's not like one side ever wins in these situations and everyone bursts into song and dance. No one can win in an argument where neither will even consider the other's viewpoint. Everyone involved is just left unsatisfied with a bitter taste in the mouth. And what I think amplifies this chaos is that more and more, it's becoming really hard to know what's real and what's not. This is both one of the most impressive but also horrifying aspects of modern day technology. Through the power of deep fakes, you can make public figures look like they're saying things they never said. You can have photos of events that never occurred. You can frame people for things they never did. It already requires specialized teams to be able to discern real from fake. I don't think it'll be long before the line between them starts to blur. Like earlier this year, millions of viewers across South Korea were tuning into their local news channel, like they always do. The usual presenter, Kim Joo-ha, was there, like you'd expect, just kind of talking through the top stories, lots of virus-related ones, as you can probably imagine. But Kim Joo-ha wasn't there. She had in fact been replaced by a deep-fake version of her that could perfectly mimic her facial expressions and gesticulations. And we soon realized this was not a one-time replacement. In a completely virtual world, it'll be impossible to know what's real and what isn't. And to some extent, what's even harder to think about is that it might not even matter to you. The more that your life exists online, the more that your world becomes just whatever news you agree with, whatever videos keep you watching the longest, whatever social media posts that reaffirm your own life decisions. Or in other words, the more you rely on algorithms that have no interest in the truth or education or self-betterment, but just to keep scrolling. And so, where all of this leads us is that our technology is more advanced and more capable of helping us than ever, but our self-reported happiness is falling. We have the highest rates of wealth we've ever had, the lowest rates of poverty, and yet more protests and unrest than almost any prior phase of humanity. And I'm not saying that protests are a bad thing. Sometimes it's the only way for people to feel like they have a voice. But in almost all cases where there's a protest, it's because there's a disagreement. And I can't see us disagreeing less going forward. If we carry on like this, I think we're moving towards an unstable world, one of extreme levels of political correctness, unwarranted levels of confidence, one where no one will admit they're wrong, but very few actually know the truth, one where people can turn on you in an instant, where tensions are always high, and instead of self-reflection, people turn to damaging others as a way to vent their own internal dissatisfaction. In case it wasn't clear, I'm nervous about the future of our society. But that brings me on to number 7. Surveillance. We are in a technology revolution. Tech is accelerating and rocketing and spiraling in all sorts of directions, and no one really wants it to stop, right? Better tech means more exciting goods to buy, a more efficient economy, better healthcare, a more effective military. But at the same time, our relationships digital, our crimes digital. Companies and governments are going to want to regulate in a way that I think we've never seen before. Did you see that Apple policy update that they announced a few months ago? That they were going to start scanning images from your Apple devices to see if any of them matched with records of child abuse victims. If there were matches, they said that they will flag your account to law enforcement for quite possibly being a child abuser. And you could say, well, of course, just don't abuse children. That's an easy one to get behind. But can you see how this is potentially a slippery slope? What if in the future, governments start pressuring companies to police not just crimes, but also just behaviors that they don't want? What if you could get arrested just because you Googled something you were curious about because that search was attributed to you being a risk factor to society? That sounds extreme, but this is kind of happening in China now. China already has a system where citizens are being rated based on the good things they do, at least as far as the government's concerned, and the bad things they do. And by bad things, I'm not talking about things like committing a crime. I'm talking crossing the road in the wrong place or playing your music too loud in public. In China right now, behaving in a way that is even slightly suboptimal to society can literally affect your rights, your ability to book flights, board trains, access healthcare, the price you pay to buy things. And you could say, well, that's just China, but the fact of it is, the core parts of the system are already in place in a lot of countries. You don't have a good credit rating, you're not getting a loan. You don't have a good Uber score, you're not getting a lift. You don't have top grades, you're not getting a place at university. Systems like this, from a macro perspective, allow society to run more efficiently. Yes, China has an extreme level of population control, but it's only possible because of how close they've gotten to their technology. And we're only getting closer. We're moving well beyond the age where a computer is just this big box that sits under your desk. We're moving towards ambient computing, an era where everything we use is a computer and everything is connected all the time, collecting data to optimize itself. And something I think about quite a lot is that, isn't it just a little bit alarming that almost every piece of software on these computing devices is becoming closed source, meaning that the code of how it's working, what it's collecting, is being hidden. And the fact that as these computers get more and more sophisticated, an average user is going to have less and less idea of what exactly they're doing. Or to put it another way, in the same way that machines and algorithms are starting to outcompete us in terms of our ability to entertain people, I also think we're at risk of being outcompeted when it comes to capability. That one day the microcomputers around us, with their ability to assimilate data and keep learning and share information with each other, will become so advanced that an average user will not even try to comprehend them, and instead just accept that they exist and use them for their benefits. I realize this sounds very eye-rolly and almost conspiracy theory level, but just look at Facebook. All the average user thinks about is, yeah, I just got a friend request from X, or, oh, person Y just liked my post, this is so great. But the truth of it is, this is a hype. All the average user thinks about is and use them for their benefits. I realize this sounds very eye-rolly and almost conspiracy theory level, but just look at Facebook. All the average user thinks about is, yeah, I just got a friend request from X, or, oh, person Y just liked my post, this is so great. But the truth of it is, this is a hyper-intelligent piece of software, designed by some of the smartest minds on the planet to manipulate prehistoric parts of our mind towards behaving in a way that's conducive to profit. The point is, as the tech becomes more sophisticated, so will the way we're being watched by it. And the higher the chance that the tech becomes so complex and nuanced that it will be able to run circles around us and our own limited brain capacities. I can see tech concentrating the balance of power towards the limited few who own it and understand it, leaving the vast majority of the population bickering amongst each other below them, but never really seeing the bigger picture. The future is going to be a real game of who do you trust? Because when the mechanisms of the technology are incomprehensible to an average citizen, you've got no choice but to trust someone who does understand it. I don't want that to be the end, though. I don't just want to make a really gloomy prediction and then dip. Technology can save lives, it can bring happiness, it can unite families, it can inspire. Tech has been my single main passion ever since I was like 13 years old. And so this video is not me trying to say it's not exciting, because it is. But what I am trying to say is that I do think it's worth taking a step back every now and again to remind ourselves what's happening behind the scenes. That if you feel like your life isn't good enough because of what you see on social media, that's not just you. I feel like that half the time. That if you feel incredibly strongly about something that you know you're not an expert in, consider what's made you come to those conclusions and why. That if you feel bad because you've just wasted 2 hours watching TikTok videos about life hacks that probably don't work, that's not you being chronically unproductive, that's TikTok being very good at its job. And also, you're not alone. The final note that I want to leave this on is that while I'm not a psychologist by any means, I do think that there's one thing we can all do to remedy a lot of the traps that the internet and technology can set for us. And that's gratitude. I think just taking a simple moment every now and again to be grateful can refocus us on what things and people really matter, can avoid that jealousy and self-loathing that social media can fuel, can fight our instincts that we just want to accept all the progress we've made in this world, and instead allow us to reappreciate how incredible it actually is. And on that note, to check out 25 inventions that are completely out of this world, click here. Or for my full review of the latest iPhone, that's here. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Alright, that's it. That's Mr. Who's the Boss. So I like to watch his content. Now let's move into doing something else.